Hola, hola. Buenas tardes a todos. Soy Natalie Baclini, quien estará acompañándolos durante este webinar como su moderadora.
On this occasion. Over the past few years, we've had the opportunity of working between, I've had the opportunity of working with Mexico and Canada in different fields, such as marketing. It's a true honor to be able to participate in Panorama Creativo, which is an event organized by the Canadian Embassy in Mexico, in order to have a better understanding of the creative industries in Mexico and Canada, and to see what we can do with the creative industries, such as creative design, graphic design, industrial design, editorial design, textile design, fashion, as well as with audiovisual, performing arts, and so on. This mapping process will be very useful to be able to encourage synergies and explore opportunities for businesses to be established between Canadian companies and the creative ecosystem in Mexico. On this occasion, we're working on a webinar in which we'll be having conversations with experts in Mexico in the fields of creativity. Remember that the official language we'll be using will be Spanish. There will be simultaneous interpretation available into English and French. At the end of the session, we'll have 10 minutes to be able to respond to any questions the audience might have, and you can write them down in the Q&A section. Let's begin the day's event. But first, I would like to thank once again the representatives from the Government of Canada, and I'd like to welcome Sacha Labasseur-Rivard, who is the Minister of Public Affairs, Education and Culture at the Canadian Embassy in Mexico. Welcome, Sacha. Thank you very much, Natalie. Can you hear me? Great. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this third session of a series of webinars that will be carried out in order to be able to share information regarding what has been happening.
Industries that have not been as widely affected as others due to the pandemic. L'information qui sera présentée aujourd'hui dans le webinaire provient d'une recherche extensive menée par l'Université Centro, qui est clairement un leader dans le secteur des industries créatives au Mexique, et avec l'appui financier du ministère du Patrimoine canadien. C'est une initiative du Service des délégués commerciaux du Canada afin de vous appuyer, vous, les compagnies canadiennes, dans le développement de vos affaires à l'étranger. As pretty much everywhere around the globe, the Mexican creative sector has been deeply affected by the pandemic. However, even if
le secteur créatif a été vraiment touché par la crise et nous sommes en train d'essayer de voir comment on peut se récupérer. Le Mexique a un marché potentiel énorme. Nous pouvons y offrir beaucoup de services. Les Mexicains sont très intéressés à travailler avec le reste du monde.
N'hésitez surtout pas à communiquer avec Ernesto Miranda, qui est notre délégué commercial pour les industries créatives, pour toute question, commentaire ou suivi. And also stay tuned for the full report that will be published in the coming months by Centro, which will for sure include...
Il va y avoir un rapport complet. Nathalie, je te cède la parole. Merci, Sacha, pour tes mots. Et nous allons commencer avec Roberto Cabezas, directeur de la licence et les projets numériques à Centro. Il nous donnera beaucoup d'autres informations. Merci beaucoup pour cet espace que vous nous donnez pour partager la position du Mexique par rapport au reste de l'Amérique latine, surtout dans le secteur créatif, surtout dans les milieux créatifs. Nous voulons donner plus de poids à ce qui est une opportunité d'être
fields such as mixed reality. And the idea is to be able to continue to work in order to improve the situation. And in all Mexico, we know that There are, for example, in the case of Mexico, Mexico has the world's 15th largest economy. In terms of our economy, it's the second largest economy in Latin America, and we're 18th in the world in terms of the value of our exports, insofar as music, video games, books, television, and film are concerned. And for the time being, that is what I wanted to say with regard to this slide. What's important about all of this is that we realize that the creative sector in Latin America and in Mexico is very important, in spite of the fact that we've had some problems over this past year. We've been able to continue with our international cooperation, because this has been helpful for us to be able to increase our cooperation with other countries. Perhaps the numbers aren't as good as they used to be in the past, but they have given us an opportunity to continue to grow in Latin America. In 2018, for example, Mexico was one of the 10 most important economies in terms of creativity, in terms of our cultural products. And we are fourth in terms of being the biggest supplier of cultural products for Canada. We are number 10 in terms of the interactive audiovisual products we export, and it applies to different fields. We're talking about interactive video products of all types. We've seen, for example, that there are a lot of new systems that are being developed, and that we require a multidisciplinary effort to be carried out. And so in general, I would say that Mexico offers a lot of multinational and multi-talent opportunities of collaboration so that we can continue to increase these numbers. For example, 1.3% of all video game exports globally are Mexican. And on top of that, we've been seeing an increase in mobile interfaces, for example. This is something that has been on the rise every year, because we've realized that the use of video games does not just refer to entertainment, but also to business fields such as well as education, that have the possibility of using devices connected in one way to video games. And that is something that we've seen that users are interested in taking advantage of much more in the future. We hope to establish a close connection between business and the creative world so that we can create ultimately a digital asset. Maybe 10 years ago, businesses didn't really consider that the creative sector would be totally promoting digital activities for taking place, but that has changed drastically over the past few years. We have a lot of technological infrastructures in which we can have a map that will tell us what the opportunities of growth in the creative sector is, so that they can work with fields that in the past have been very closely connected to techniques and technical aspects. And so there's going to be a merger of the technological world as well as the creative world. And all of this will be taking place in many different fields, including cultural and the business world. And that will help surely for the development of all of us. Insofar as infrastructure is concerned, we've been trying to focus on what's happening with cell phones. Because we believe that it helps us have a clearer idea of how much growth we can expect for the industry, in spite of the fact that we're 10th in terms of our population globally. 87.5% or 88% of our population have a cell phone, but not all of them have the technological capacity for people to use interactive apps, for example. And so although it's a technological device that is in use throughout the entire country, we believe that there's still a lot of opportunities for growth because something very interesting has been happening. The interactive media is not that isolated. 31 million of the inhabitants in Mexico are between the ages of 15 and 29. And that is not all, because there are also people that are up to 50 years old, for example, who also use their cell phones for gaming purposes or video gaming purposes and entertainment as well. And they use video games or they use apps in their phones that help them to learn as well. And we've always seen that as an opportunity for the rest of us. Perhaps one of the most relevant things I would say about what has happened in the past year is that e-commerce has grown significantly, and not just because of the economic growth it represents, but also because it means that we're accepting that digital, whatever is digital, is much more valuable than we thought in the past, because in the past we used to value things that you could touch and feel. But now we've realized that with an increase in e-commerce, there is a possibility of many more things for our citizens, and citizens are much more widely accepting e-commerce, as well as the possibility of using digital formats for cultural purposes. How interesting, Roberto. Thank you very much for giving us that overview of what's happening with the sector. Bearing that in mind, I would like to ask if all of our panelists could tell us what they think about what's happening in this field. And so I'd like to ask Mariana Delgado, who is the director of the Digital Culture Center, to make a few comments. Hello, Mariana. Thank you for coming. Thank you, and thank you to the embassy, the Canadian Embassy in Mexico, for this invitation. I work with an agency that is part of the federal government and in which we experiment, train, produce, exhibit, and distribute the creations, the products, the development of digital culture. And in particular, we want to make sure that the digital world can be used for different products, not just for culture, but also so that it can be viewed as a creative process, as a technology and infrastructure, and something that we can use to learn, a network culture, a digital culture that we're all living, as you've all seen over the past year. And we know that there's a lot of cultural value in everything that we do in the digital world, but there's also a lot of economic value to what they do. We've been working with several labs that focus on video games, electronic reading, immersion, development, design, and so on. And amongst other things, we encourage a creative digital economy that is called Compás Creativo, Creative Compass, in which they're working on digital activities using hybrid methodologies. This is a project that we started out in 2018. And so the whole premise was to be able to have information, that is to say, hard facts, with regard to this emerging field, which is very specialized and very innovative, so that we could design more appropriate public policies. And so that's how Compás Creativo was started out initially in 2018 and in 2019. The first study we carried out was in order to have the statistics, to have all the information provided to us by the National Institute of Geography and Statistics, and IT, so that we could have a better understanding of what's happening in the field of creativity and how it's affecting the world of software and design. And we also wanted to have a better idea of how the development was taking place in each one of the states. Mexico, we had the most of the information we had was with regard to Mexico City. And we also had information for the country in its entirety, but we didn't have information specifically for each one of the states. Thanks to the study that was conducted, we realized that we had approximately 100,000 companies that work in the world of creativity, which is 1.7% of the businesses in Mexico, and that they create a significant number of jobs. And that was very important for us to know. And we were also able to identify that although they were mostly concentrated in either Mexico City or in the state of Mexico, that there were also other poles of creative development that specialize in different fields. For example, in the southern part of the country, in the states of Puebla and the states of Guerrero, they have a lot of businesses that focus on arts and crafts, handicrafts, whereas in Jalisco, for example, the state of Jalisco, they focus more on digital gaming, for example. And we know that the business is very resilient. It can automate itself very readily. And so we realize that in Mexico, in the States, our creative economy was growing up to 10% compared to 5% in other business sectors. And so we definitely view this sector as being very dynamic. And so I think that this is just to give you a general overview of the trends and how we have a lot of very basic data regarding the ecosystem. There was a report on innovation to have a better understanding of what was happening in the world of audiovisual. We did this in a pilot project that was carried out in 2018 that we published in 2019, and now we're going to do it nationwide with other fields of the creative industries, such as, for example, video games, design, and music. What we were able to see in that study was that more than half of the audiovisual organizations in Mexico and in Monterrey are small, with between 1 to 10 employees. Only 4% of the companies managed to have more than 250 workers. And what these companies do have in general is a very high level of training. Approximately 64% of the workers in these companies have graduate degrees or master's degrees, in which, bearing in mind that in Mexico, approximately just 20% of the population have graduate studies. A significant number of them also have specialized studies in the arts, and 59% of them also have an academic career. And so we're talking about personnel that is highly trained in the audiovisual field, but it also includes interactive media, immersion, and video games on occasion. We also learned, and that's also very important, that 70% of the companies believe that freelancers or self-employed workers are their most important source of labor, but they're also very interested in innovation. There's a lot of capacity of being more creative and more innovative because they're freelance workers, self-employed, and that they're core to different fields such as design services, and software development. So as you can see from this overview, the trends are that people are highly trained in companies and that they can complement themselves when they work with different fields such as science, technology, engineering, maths. An important transformation that is taking place is in terms of the development of products and services, digital products and services, which is a growing need, and that has led to an increase in e-commerce. There is a very healthy relationship with institutions, with the chambers of commerce, research centers, academia, and they also have an extreme interest in innovation. So that's what we've been able to achieve so far. Since last year, we've been focusing on establishing a statistic directory of digital creative services in Mexico. We started out with 5 states, the main ones being Mexico City, the state of Jalisco, the state of Nuevo León, the state of Yucatan. And now we're going to increase that to encompass all of the states in the country. What we want to do is to have the statistics that are very valuable so we can have a better understanding of all the profound changes that are taking in this community, but we also want to be able to offer in the field of collaboration, exchange and development, the possibility of giving Canada a directory of creative digital services so that they can have a very clear idea of all of these growing companies and also understand who the freelancers are, who the self-employed workers are, so we can have a clear idea of the map of our economy, which is now very different from what it used to be. We've established new value chains based on the measurements that we've carried out in the field of digital activities. It's a project that is underway. There's a project that is underway in which we're working on it with Centro, and we hope that next year we'll be able to have information so that we can have professional directories, let's say, so that we can have a list of the skilled labor in Mexico. We also work with immersion, augmented, mixed, and virtual reality. That's something that we've been working on for many years now in collaboration with Centro and private companies. It's an emerging field. It's a growing field. It's always been connected to design and video games. But now it's not just in that field, but it's also being used in relation to other services and other products. And artistically speaking, the levels of production are of extremely high quality. With that, I've concluded all of my comments. Thank you very much. Great job. Very valuable information. Thank you very much, Mariana, for your comments. Now let's move on with Giberto Castro, who is the co-founder of his organization. Gilberto, welcome. We would love to hear from you and to know what has been done with the creative world in your company and what experience you've had with companies that use virtual, augmented reality, as well as immersion activities. So please tell us what are your best practices and what your experiences have been. Thank you for coming. Hello, my name is Giberto Castro. I'm a co-founder in INTUS, which is a specialized study that focuses on multimedia and interactive processes. The company was created approximately 12 years ago, and in our portfolio, we have hundreds of projects that we've developed with interactive and immersive technologies. We've worked with different clients such as Nike, Porsche, Volkswagen, the automotive industry. We've also worked with Disney Amazon, and the portfolio of clients that we have and projects that we have is very broad indeed. And we've worked in different fields of immersive and interactive digitals with different types of mapping, multi-touch, virtual reality, mixed reality, and now all of this, which is now known as extended reality. So that's what we offer. But it all begins with creativity. We believe that innovation is key to this field. And we can look for new technologies, new software, new ways of executing things. In the creative field, I wanted to tell you a little bit about the story of our company so you could have a better idea of how we handle things. And so for you to have a better understanding of how Mexico does things. We started to work with a 2-meter big touch screen for interactive efforts, and we started with the development of hardware. We integrated that hardware using infrared camera and software as well. And we sold some units, one to Unilever, for example. They were one of our first customers, but we quickly realized that the development of hardware in Mexico was barely starting out, whereas in other countries, they were already implementing all of these types of solutions at an industrial level. That was precisely when the first iPhone was being launched. And so what we decided to do was to completely change our purpose and change our content. Instead of developing hardware, we thought it would be better for us to import the hardware and export content instead. And that's where we became a content studio, developing software and developing apps, multi-touch apps. And we also started to use projection mapping techniques that were being used in the city. And we also started to use virtual reality when it all began with Oculus, and in which, at the time in which it started to take on a more important role in the global economy. As Mariana was saying, in this past year, or the past 2 years, I think we've focused more on exporting our services. Although we do have a lot of clients in Mexico, but we've had, thankfully, the opportunity of exporting our services to other countries, particularly the US, which is why I think this is going to be a good opportunity for Canadian industry as well to be able to work with us, because we're highly developed in this field in Mexico. And since we've been able to export our services to other countries, we've realized the needs that other countries might have and what types of difficulties we might face. And the first thing I would say is what's most important is content. We have a lot of designers, great creative individuals. We've got very youthful talent as well. We have a lot of young people that graduate from college and they're highly skilled. They can make enormous contributions to this field. And I think that that's one of the opportunities that Mexico can offer globally. The fact that we can export our services and our content. We have the possibility of developing software, design. That's what we've been doing at INTUS over the past few years. I would also like to say that we started out 12 years ago when there were very few companies that were providing these types of services. And so we were always looking into who was the competition, who was doing what. And now I can say that growth in this field has been exponential. Both the supply as well as the demand for these types of services has grown significantly. Insofar as the best practices are concerned, I've always believed that it's important for us to be not just innovative, but we also have to be artistic, creative, always be one step ahead of the others. In Mexico, we're extremely creative at providing solutions and integrating those solutions in products and services. And so in general, I think that that's what I would say. Great. Thank you very much, Gil. And to conclude this first block of presentations, we have Federico Isuani, who is the founder of BESO and chair of IAB Mexico, which is the Internet Advertising Bureau. Welcome, Federico. We know you've been very successful in your field. Can you tell us a little bit about what you've been able to achieve? Thank you very much. It's an honor to be here with you. Thank you to the Canadian Embassy for the invitation. I was very interested when I heard about the subject of this webinar, because this is a unique point in our lives, because we've gone through an unexpected event that led to changes and accelerated a lot of changes that had already been taking place. And obviously in Mexico, the same thing has happened as took place in the rest of the world. Mariana already gave you a lot of the numbers regarding jobs created. We nonetheless know that approximately 30% of jobs in the communications industry were lost during this pandemic. And if you bear in mind that the fact that the pandemic has helped us to realize that you can hire creative talent, not just in our own countries, but from other countries, it has helped us to understand that we can grow much faster, so that Mexico can grow in other countries as well. Our Mexican talent can grow and offer its services in other countries as well, which is why it's important that we understand that anybody can work with suppliers or clients from other countries. Mexico, for example, this is a wonderful opportunity for everybody. We have a lot of clients and communication agencies that are starting to hire communication services from other countries. And we've seen for the first time how there are a lot of agencies that are starting to hire production services, design services, or different fields from other countries, which was something that was rarely something we could do. But now this has become a reality. You might think that when the pandemic slows down, the situation might change. And that might be something that will happen. Perhaps we'll continue to use our local suppliers once the pandemic is over. But we've seen, at least through the pandemic, that there's a lot of dynamism, that it doesn't have to be just local, and that the entire region, Mexico and the entire region, can be more capable of understanding that suppliers can be found everywhere, and they can be viewed almost as if they were local suppliers. And there are a lot of opportunities to be had, because there are more and more regional Latin American strategies that are being carried out in Mexico. And that helps us to understand that access to creativity can be done with all countries. I've seen that a lot of virtual reality companies, virtual marketing, are now, from other parts of the world, are now working with Mexican companies. A lot of us are realizing that we can work with foreign suppliers, and that there really is no problem in doing so, because we realize that it's the same thing for us to be able to talk with each other over the phone or face-to-face as it is to use Zoom. And this just goes to show how we can continue to work with foreign suppliers. What I'm trying to say then is that now is the time. Now is the time for us to start to work in Mexico with clients and suppliers. And this is a unique opportunity that we all have. And that's what I would leave you with. That's all I wanted to say to start out. Thank you very much. And if you need more information, I can help you. Just contact Centro. And I would love to be able to open the door for more cooperation between our two countries. Thank you very much, Federico. In the second block, I'd like to ask Roberto to please tell me a little bit about the more important subsectors in Mexico. You have the floor, Roberto. Thank you. Video games have been the guiding force in our growth. But in terms of video games and their content is where we feel there are going to be more possibilities of cooperating with other countries. We need to have insight in each one of our countries as to what other countries require. As I said initially, video games is a field that is very diverse. There are some very interesting things happening, for example, such as when you start to play games when you're 16, you continue to play them even when you're 50. And so that's something important for us to understand. There's also been exponential growth in the use of games. Iberoamerica, specifically, is very important in the use of these types of immersive technologies. Culturally speaking, mixed reality or augmented reality tend to focus more on the field of entertainment, but the exponential growth we've seen also includes not just entertainment. Virtual reality and augmented reality have an economic impact of 15.6 trillion US dollars, but it can also be used for the aerospace industry, with the health industry. Virtual reality and augmented reality can be used in all those types of products and services so that, for example, in the field of health, you can have better monitoring of your patients. And with this, we've seen that AR and VR can be used not just for entertainment. Right now, video games tend to use virtual reality a lot more than the other industries because they've adopted it since very early on, but there are a lot of opportunities. Augmented reality and mixed reality offer a lot of opportunities as well, so that you can position your body in a certain fashion so that you can see things differently, is also something that is being used in other industries, because your eyes can be used to have a different view of the world. And so the growth or the numbers that you see up on the slide are not just being used for video games or for the field of entertainment. As I said, there's always a lot of potential in which gaming can be used in with other technologies, and with that increase the adoption of that type of technology in other industries. Continuing to explain what the situation is in Iberoamerica, I would say that annual return on investment is significant as well. When you realize, for example, that you can have access to a multidisciplinary team with a wider scope, you realize that you can grow significantly. Trends and strategies are very important in helping us to have this whole collective thought, which has been something that has helped us with our practical and conceptual growth when using these types of technologies. As Mariana was saying, there's also a lot of interest in exploring and developing research together with public and private organizations to have a better understanding of the type of changes that are taking place. You'll see in a moment when we talk about success stories, how success can be found in different fashions. For example, we have those who help us to have a different understanding of art, in which multidisciplinary work can help us to have a better understanding of concepts and using technologies in markets that didn't used to use them. One example is what Rafael Lozano Hemmer did. Then we also have the example of the MUTEC Festival, which is a platform for art and sound, amongst many others. Interactive technologies and mixed reality, media, augmented reality and virtual reality help us to see that we can come closer to each other even though we're far apart. There's another example of another success story, which is Massive Art, which is a Canadian art consultancy and production agency with offices in Mexico City. The Bjork Digital, established by Bjork, the singer. And there's another example of Trick Eye, which is an immersion system that is used in which not only do we digitize a technology, but it also helps us to introduce ourselves into these new types of environments. And then there's the example of Van Gogh Alive, which is has had a lot of visitors, and that has been very interesting in terms of how many people have been trying to experience it. When we talk about the use of our imagination and how we can find new opportunities thanks to our imagination, we ultimately end up with projects such as that of Alejandro Iñárritu, which is called Carne y Arena, in which you can understand that there are different ways of telling stories and in which we can have even greater growth in our arts, thanks to the use of these types of technologies. Although we might have infrastructure and devices, remember that what we have to encourage is for all of those to be adopted, and that in order for us to be able to see the benefits to be had when adopting those types of technologies. The success stories I've just referred to highlight the importance of the multidisciplinary work that has to be undertaken in order to move ahead. And so there are a lot of opportunities of collaboration, but not just on the technological side, also on the cultural side. And with that, we can mutually understand our corresponding cultures. That's it for me. Thank you. Great, thank you. Now I'd like to ask Mariana, Gilberto, Federico, all of you to please make your comments. And I would remind those who are attending this event to please write down your questions in the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen so that we can talk a little bit more about our own success stories or answer any questions you might have. We already have 2 questions. What's more? Maybe we should start taking those questions.
Bueno, voy a empezar con la primera pregunta.
I'll start with the first question for Gilberto.
Un estudio de creatividad y
In
tecnología.
your experience, what percentage of projects use international collaboration? And could you give me an example of the collaboration that has taken place? Well, I would say that 50% of our projects are with international collaboration. And if you want, I can show you an example. Let me share. I don't know if I can share my screen and show you something that we've done. Is that okay? No answer, so I'm going to assume that it's okay. And I'm going to share my screen. So this is a project that we developed together with the Pantone Color Institute. Last year, there was a project called Color of the Year for this dark blue. And the installation was set up in New York, in the Arctic House Museum, where there are a lot of large-scale artists exhibiting their works. And that was a collaboration in which we developed the content, the script, the experience, how it was going to work out, production, production of the content, and also the montage and the installation. The Institute itself had to provide us with guidelines regarding how they wanted the project to take place. So that was a very interesting example of collaboration. Mexico developed the content. And they had the hardware, the infrastructure, so that we could carry out the project. Oh, that sounds great. Thank you for sharing that. Before we move on, and in the hope that more questions will be posed on the Q&A box, I would like to ask all of you what recommendations you would make, all of the panelists. Could you please tell us what would you recommend to Canadian companies if they want to work in this field in Mexico? What would you recommend that they do? Can I start? Yes, please. Great. Well, the first thing I would say is related to confidence in remote working, because there are companies that are offering services and they first ask for a test because they want to make sure of our capacity so that clients can test our services out first for free. And I would assure you that Mexico is very loyal in that sense, because sometimes Mexicans, because what happens is that Mexican companies are asked to do something, they try to do it, and once they do it, they will always be loyal to you and always be willing to help you. And so think about that possibility of having confidence in the possibility of working remotely. Would anybody else like to add anything? I would probably add that there are a lot of companies, especially Canadian companies, who have been able to achieve so much in this field, and that's why so many Mexican companies turn towards Canada, knowing that they excel in this field. And hopefully at some point, Canada will also view us in Mexico as a key player in this field. There are a lot of Canadian companies that have sent representatives to Mexico, and I think that they've all realized that this is a very fertile market here in Mexico. with the new Kuzma, I'm sure that we'll also see a lot of growth. And above all, what I would say is that this relationship between our two countries is most definitely going to be positive. Would you like to add anything, Roberto? Well, I would also suggest that you look into the tax incentives that are being provided here in Mexico as well. In Mexico, there are a lot of tax incentives that speak of the importance of art and how it can be a part of our creative development. It's an interesting combination because we're still in the process of developing our profile and striking a balance with the world of technology, but there are different types of support that can be provided, such as ProSoft, in which they provide you with backing for software development in very diverse fields. And so that type of support does exist in Mexico, but it's not often used because sometimes people don't understand what type of a final product can be developed. And so what I would say that you realize that we do have tax incentives in Mexico. I know that you do have them in Canada as well. In Mexico, for example, what they do is they provide support and backing so that they can develop a final product. So I'm sure that in that sense, it can be a very enriching process. Mexico might have the tax incentives that can help with the startup of the project, and Canada might have the tax incentives to perhaps not keep it going, but at least to give you an opportunity of having continuing growth. Monique is asking where they can get more information regarding those tax incentives. You would probably have to refer to the report that we're working on because they can be found in different platforms of the Mexican government. Everything related to national and incentives is very dispersed. And so I think the report that we're working on will be the best source of information. And also there's a question regarding what are they called? Are those the Eficine tax incentives? Yes, it's called Eficine, Efiarte. They're all part of those same tax incentives for visual arts, for dance, and so on. The advantage has been that they're open to different practices and that they can offer a lot of opportunities for interaction. All right, moving on to the final questions and giving our audience a few more minutes so that they can pose their questions. Do you have any success stories as to how collaborations have taken place between Mexico and Canada, how Mexican and Canadian companies have collaborated? Who would like to take that? Well, I think Roberto already mentioned it, but I would also mention MUTEC, which is a festival in Canada. And when it was exported to Mexico, they started to afterwards do it in other countries as well. Mexico was kind of like the first field in which they tested it out to see if they could work with this MUTEC festival in other parts of the world. And so when we were able to hold festivals, which is not the case right now, there were a lot of people participating in the festival. What's more, I think more people participated in the MUTEC festival in Mexico than they did in Canada. So that's just an example of things that can happen. Yes, I've worked with them. I think that there is a lot of opportunities. As Federico said, now is the time to take advantage of all of these opportunities. And perhaps just to round out the whole subject of the tax incentives, there are tax incentives for science and engineering, but they're available only through creative thought, because scientific fundraising is carried out differently now because it has to have a connection with the creative industry, and it leads to the possibility of having more collaboration between companies in Mexico as well as companies in other parts of the world, in which we take advantage of the sensitivity of a designer, for example, in the development of new technologies. And so perhaps another bit of advice I would say is that you not just focus on looking for incentives for the arts or technologies, because there are different ways of indirectly having access to incentives. Great, thank you very much. Would anybody like to add anything else? Jaime was asking, for example, how he could be able to contact you and have for participating in projects. I would remind everybody that there is a report that will be published at the end of this whole process, and you'll probably be able to find all of the information you want there. I don't know if there are any other questions or if any of the panelists would like to add anything before we conclude this session. Well, in my case, and I'm sorry for repeating this so many times, I would just say that this is the perfect time for you to hold this type of event in which we can all understand the opportunities to be had. It's a fantastic opportunity to develop the interaction between Mexico and Canada. We've always been very close, and with CUSMA, we're even closer. And with the pandemic, all these changes have been accelerated. And so I assure you that whoever places their bets on this field, you'll stand a lot to win at the end. Okay, we've only got 2 minutes left. There's a person who has a virtual reality project, Marcos Millon, and he wants to know where he can find suppliers that can help them with the technological phase. I can help you, contact you with the IAB so that you can know what can be done here in Mexico. And perhaps with that, you'll have a better understanding of what type of company can help you out with that. Great. So it looks like we've run out of time. This is the end of this wonderful conversation that we've had, in which we've gotten a lot of information and a lot of data regarding the opportunities to be had. I would like to thank all of the participants for joining us in this third webinar, part of this cycle that will continue until the end of May. And I'm sure that this will give Canadian entrepreneurs to have a better idea of the opportunities to be had in Mexico and the business opportunities to be had. We hope you join us next time around on April the 30th, when we will be talking about business opportunities in the audiovisual sector. Thank you for participating. Thank you, everybody.